Hello everyone, my name is Richa Mahajan. I'm assistant professor in Department of Journalism and Mass Communication, Jagannath University, Jaipur. Today I'm going to talk about photographs can communicate. Let's talk about how photography can communicate. Number 1 is communicate with photography. Communicating a scene or an object in photography is similar to communicating in writing. It makes more sense if there is an order. Sentence take if we a word up jumble. Sorry, if we take a sentence and jumble the words, it has the same contents, but the meaning is lost. I will repeat again. Sentence take if we a word up jumble. I am sorry. If we take a sentence and jumble the words up, it has the same contents, but the meaning is lost. At the other extreme, a poet can arrange the words to provoke feelings and thoughts outside of the sentence. Next is landscape poetry. In a visual way, a photographer has to arrange the objects in a scene so that they make sense, and artists will arrange subjects in a scene to provoke emotions because a photograph because a photograph captures a moment in time. The timings of your photography is an important part of how a photograph communicates what the photographer want to say. Next is compositions talk. How composition can talk. Landscape photographers aim to communicate a spatial perspective where things are in relation to the viewer. They will communicate depth through composition, focus, focal length, and light. They usually want everything to be in focus so that it feels like you are there in the scene. But to invite you into the scene, the skilled landscape photographer will use objects carefully to invite you in. Imagine two parts of a wide river. One is just water from bank to bank, the other has stepping stones. You will be more likely to pay more attention to the part with stepping stones because even if you don't want to cross, the invite is there and this provokes thought. Neuroscientists have discovered mirror cells which trigger in the brain when an object that could be played with are presented. The landscape photographers will find objects in the foreground which invite you to wander into the picture. The product photographer will want you to handle the teapot and pour out the tea. When I set up my camera for a landscape photo, I like to be close enough to actually touch the foreground. If I can touch it when I am looking through my lens, then the viewer will have their mirror cells tickled. Next is communicate with focus. A skilled photographer a skilled photographer can use sharpness to communicate. Sharpness is achieved with focus, aperture, and post processing. A large aperture such as f stop 2.8 will allow the portrait photographer to focus on a very narrow plane, is that the face or eyes, and everything else will fall out of focus. This works as communication because it is holding your attention on a very specific part of the image. A shallow DOF is unavoidable in macro or close up photography, and the images have a 3D feel. Focus is the one way of isolating the subject from the background. Next is communicating emotion. In photographic art, the most important communication is that of emotion. You want the viewer to share your feelings of when you were there. The basically comes This basically comes down to being able to compose, expose, and focus while being in the right place at the right time. Easy, right? No, you have to practice. Composing photos all the time, you are awake to really your cameras, you are awake to really master and understand scenic composition. Study your lenses to master focus. Push the limits of your camera's exposure potential and be at many different places at different times until you get the combination. Mastering all the skills takes dedication that is almost obsessive. Maybe passion is a better word. Even the last part of that list is challenging. But if you manage to communicate emotions through the photography, it will be well worth it. Alright, next is to achieve emotion in the viewer, the photograph has to show the nature of the subject and its best or worst by but at the same time it in its purest form. For example, a close-up photo of a fresh snow on an iceberg or swans flying across the moon, a nature photograph that is powerful yet simple. The composition, arrangements, and focus is forcing a human perspective of natural reality. The visual beauty depends heavily on proportions, so photographic minimalist landscapes would only work with good proportions. But practicing photography does not have to be complicated or expensive. You can use a cheap camera if you have a good eye and you are not concerned about large prints. Nature photography gets closer to photo art when the photographer communicates emotions visually. Next is communicate movement. Like some other visual arts, photography has a movement element. A shutter speed can communicate emotion by either freezing an incredible movement or showing the silky water effect on a long exposure. Waterfall scene. The sense of movement or freezing of the subject adds to the communication of the photographic subject. Now take a look on the photograph which I have pasted below. Next is conclusion. In conclusion, photography is an art that is used to communicate ideas, emotions, and perspectives. The photographer must think carefully about what they are trying to communicate and how they will do it. A skilled photographer can use composition, timing, light, and focus to emphasize the message they are trying to express by taking the time to understand how the individual elements of a photograph can add to or detract from the overall communication. Photographers can create compelling images that effectively convey a message. Thank you so much.